So like you said, my name is Michael Flotron. I'm currently a full-time developer, and for those of you who don't know me, over the last few years, I've sort of developed a little bit of a niche for myself when it comes to the video world as it pertains to Bubble and just the no-code space, right? In addition to my own projects, my own clients, I've consulted with others on how to best implement streaming practices in their apps, especially in challenging scenarios, like in countries that don't have excellent internet connections or where the devices may not be of the top tier. So that's a little bit about my background there. It also seems fitting. I put ex-filmmaker up here for a reason because I do come from the film world. I did previously work as a DIT, which is a digital imaging technician. So yeah, let's move on. I don't have a traditional coding background, but I was always just a generally technical person, right? So I was always kind of building tools for myself in the film world to be able to help out with my job. I was always just kind of, don't ask me what, films I've seen. That wasn't really why I was in the industry. I was in it for being able to use the technology for storytelling, right? The most technical I ever got in my background before getting into Bubble was I was studying for my Salesforce like junior developer cert, right? So that's pretty much as technical as I got back then. So to go over a little bit about what we're going to talk about today, the first thing I want to talk about streaming video, of course. Within the context of my own journey building Trackland, I am one of the co-founders, but the only technical co-founder there. Which this also happens to be my first Bubble app, which is still in use today, I proudly say. We're going to talk about how you can use your technical foundation, even if it is just a curiosity to drive real creative projects that scale. We've had over 100,000 viewers on Trackland. Really proud to say that, especially because that was the first Bubble app. We're also going to go through, so like I said, real examples from my own company. We're going to then do a deep dive into the world of streaming, so understanding what streaming video is, how it's different from just using static MP4s, which is what a lot of people tend to do, and what a modern delivery stack looks like at all levels, from the I want to roll at my own level to I'm just going to rely on a third-party API, which is kind of what we did with Trackland. So we'll kind of look at that scale there. Finally, we're going to look at how to implement. So I'm going to use Trackland as a bit of an example for what stack we use for that particular product. So 2020, some months into the pandemic, I co-founded a project called Trackland, like I said, with two partners. Our goal was pretty ambitious. We wanted to create the first COVID-safe professional track and field meet, which meant going virtual with the actual broadcast. The first 4 or 5 meets that we did had no in-person audience. It was only the athletes themselves who had to go through their testing protocol and things of that nature. And so being able to cater in the best way possible to our virtual audience was super important. To do this, what we did is we basically built a complete pay-per-view purchasing system, ticketing system, along with as much user interactivity as we could. So for us, that meant being able to do fan polling. That pay-per-view money wasn't just profit for us, that actually also partially contributed to the prize purse for these events. That prize purse we were showing was live updating, and it was actually broken down by each event and also further broken down by what place they would get in that event, right? You could also, in that kind of world, people would kind of try and convince certain runners to enlist in a certain event, and so you could also contribute to a specific event with those funds, right? And then, of course, also the production itself. So this is where, my film background comes into play here. We're bringing in the cameras, we're bringing in the video switchers, all that sort of stuff, right? Initially, like I said, I come from a somewhat technical background, but I never considered myself a coder. And so initially we started, thought that we were gonna have to save up our pennies to hire a real developer to accomplish what we were trying to do. At the time, the baby developer in me was trying to figure out how can I actually build this, right? And that's when I ended up stumbling upon Bubble. tinkered around with it for half a day and decided almost right then and there that I had to give it a shot. I think we can pull this off, right? This was 2 months before our first event. Our first event, where we used this method of live streaming on that platform, was the Lilac Grand Prix in Washington. And what we put on wasn't just a track meet. I like to call it, it was a creative solution to an impossible situation, right? And to be fair, it was executed with a lot of duct tape, but the mission was accomplished. And here are some images from that event. We used Bubble to be able to, I don't think you can see this, but anyways, on the top left, we used Bubble to drive the results, to be able to ingest data from the timing company, being able to display that with our switcher. This was just kind of like our landing page there. This was kind of cool because this is a Bubble app that's running on these touchscreen displays that are there at the venue, at the podium. And so people were, in addition to just being able to do it online or on their phones, able to put in their fan polling results, and then we would text them an image of what their picks were so that they could post on social media. So thought that was pretty cool. So I'm gonna come back to this a little bit later. We'll definitely talk about like the trial and error that I went through, so that hopefully if you're building your app and you would like to bring in some sort of streaming video, you don't have to go through that. But let's go ahead and first we'll talk about video itself, right? So a lot of people will assume that video on the web is just a matter of uploading a file and playing it. What does that look like in Bubble, right? Some people think it's as simple as taking an MP4 file, throwing it into a video player element on Bubble, and then hitting play, you're good to go, right? But there are, in some narrow use cases, this may be sufficient. If you have video files that are maybe under 30 seconds, yeah, it's gonna be a matter of seconds for your browser to cache it, but there are flaws. The biggest flaw, I would say, is that video files are big. Getting those big files from US East 2 to your thousands of viewers is more difficult than you might think. Streaming is different. Here are some of the disadvantages of just using a static MP4 file, right? You have limited seeking capabilities. Some players will try and do some sort of kind of like fake seeking in order to pull parts of the file. If you seek to the middle of an hour-long video, it will try and do that, but not all players are going to support that. It's also highly dependent upon the video format that you uploaded in the first place, right? The other issue is that slow connections simply don't work. I have a quick demo that I'm going to show you later on that demonstrates this. But if you think about, okay, if I have a video that is 10 megabits per second, that's like the bit rate that is required to play it back and to deliver it to the browser, and my user's connection is slower than that, they're quite simply just not going to be able to play it, right? This maybe brings you back to the early 2010s of trying to watch a YouTube video and you have to wait for portion of it to buffer, play that, and oh my gosh, it wasn't fast enough, so you have to like pause again and wait for it to continue buffering, right? That's not an experience that you want to have, and we have the technology now to be able to avoid that, right? The other big concern, wasted bandwidth. When you load up that page in a static MP4 way, and in order to seek in most players, you're going to have to load everything up before that seek. We're doing long format, in this case live, but this is going to apply to both VOD and live content. If your user wants to start in the middle, you're effectively losing that bandwidth, the bandwidth that would have taken up from them streaming that first half. So that's a big loss as well, and that's costing you money. The other issue is limited analytics capabilities. So once that video file is sent to the browser, there are some analytics that you can pull from the player itself if you have a player that supports that, but your server is kind of out of the equation at that point. So you're kind of limited at what information you can pull at that point. The other issue is poor security. We talked a little bit about security like an hour ago, right? Anything that's delivered to the browser, the user has access to. Whether there are obviously some security implementations that you could put in place here, but ultimately your user's browser has that video in memory. They can do what they want with it, right? If you're dealing with DRM'd content, we were dealing with pay-per-view content, where we did have scenarios of people sharing it unauthorized or whatever, but if you can try and limit that to the best of your ability, that's gonna kind of help you out there. So why does this matter? Well, one is because user experience matters. Some of the advantages going with streaming video as a method to deliver content, it's going to be faster load times. This is going to be both for initial loads as well as seeking, right? And this is going to be for a variety of reasons that we'll talk about in a second. The other thing is you're just going to simply have more devices that are supported. This comes down to device specs, being able to deliver adaptive bit rates, and being able to deliver in potentially different formats that maybe you know, all formats don't support the Dash streaming protocol, and so you need to determine that you will need to deliver this in another format, or maybe you even need to do some encoding on the fly in order to deliver it to certain devices. This is something you can do with streaming, much more complicated when you're dealing with static video. We talked a little bit about this already. Streaming saves bandwidth. When you're delivering in chunks and you're handling seeking, you're not having to deliver as much content and you're saving there. The other thing is bitrate optimizations. Not everybody's device is going to be streaming in 1080p, 10 megabit per second video content. Most will be watching on their phone. I can tell you for Trackland, we have about 70% of our viewers that are on their phone, which was very unexpected when you consider like what our content is long form content. So we are able to save a lot of bandwidth because of that as well. You have more control over your content. Part of this comes down to security of your content. Being able to have signed URLs that are going to be specific for your users so they can't, you know, share them around, making it not as easy to rip off. And then I talked a little bit about this before, JIT, just-in-time encoding. I'll give you a quick example of this. We are able to utilize just-in-time encoding if you're bringing in, say, like raw footage, and you say need to overlay some content onto it. Let's say like we have our clock or we have our results, that sort of stuff. And maybe I'm trying to think of like a better example here, but basically something that is relevant at the time that it's being streamed rather than something that was part of the content when it was originally recorded, right? You can bring that in at the time that's actually streamed. So I have a quick little example here. On the left-hand side, I have, first to set this up, so in this environment, this is just some recordings that you're gonna see here, but I just, in Chrome, set it up so that we're limited to 5 megabits per second of bandwidth, and these videos are encoded in 6 megabit per second MP4, right? And so what you're gonna see when I hit next on the static MP4 side is that you're gonna see that it effectively very quickly fails to be able to play the content. I'm gonna try and go ahead and seek right there, and it's pretty much not gonna work. And then here you can see that you're gonna get that kind of old school YouTube buffering bar at the bottom, right? And this is just a 22-second video, but the bandwidth constraints were below what I was trying to deliver it, right? Now on the right-hand side, this is a stream from Mux, right? And so this is going to load up quite a bit faster. And I'm gonna kind of show you here too. One, so it is playing at a decent frame rate. I am gonna be able to seek here. And then you're gonna be able to see that it actually, the reason it was able to do that is because it was able to immediately dish me out a version of that same video that was at a lower bit rate and a lower resolution, right? So when it comes to like the user experience, like it's an easy comparison to make there, right? That when, you know, the streaming video is a lot better at showing this content. So what streaming involves, these are just kind of some things to consider when you're thinking about your pipeline. The first is going to be capturing the content. A lot of video sources are not going to be immediately streaming friendly. For somebody who comes from the film world, this is just kind of very self-evident. Your cameras are going to be recording at, in most cases, greater than 100 megabit per second bit rate, and that's not content that you want to be streaming online. One, it's unnecessary bandwidth that you're wasting. You're wasting a ton of money there. Two, usually the formats are not going to be compatible with whatever you're trying to stream with. And there's just a ton of issues there, right? The next thing is going to be processing, which includes transcoding. So this is going to be creating all of the different renditions. So the 270p, the 480p, the 720p, 1080p, all those that you see are called renditions. And preparing all of those in advance is how Mux and other APIs like Brightcove are able to handle that delivery method, right? So next is going to be delivery. Multi-CDNs, I say that as a plural statement because you're going to want multi-CDNs. A lot of our viewers for Trackland are in Japan and in Australia. And in some earlier versions of what we did before we had multi-CDN set up, we had trouble being able to deliver to them. And that results in support emails that we receive on our side, right? The other thing is going to be load management for when it comes to delivery. Finally, we have playback. So there's really a lot that goes into the actual player that you see in your browser. There's going to be analytics and monitoring. Those are some considerations you want to make in terms of capabilities with what you're dealing with. And then also being able to support the adaptive bitrate streaming. It's a lot, but thankfully there are services that can kind of help you handle that complexity, which we'll get to in a little bit. So now we'll talk a little bit about how to actually implement the solution that we did for Trackland. First, I do want to kind of go over the roll your own solution. I kind of just put together a rough list of all of the different Amazon services that you would have to use in order to handle proper delivery of video content, right? This is small text. It's not really meant for you to be able to go through systematically, but it's a lot, right? How you have to worry about the ingestion. You have to worry about generating all of those renditions. You have to worry about storing it. Also too, how do you want to handle cold storage? You don't want to be paying full S3 rates for all of this content that you maybe get seen, is in the archive and is only seen every once in a while. Dealing with delivery, playback, security, and analytics all on your own, right? One thing I did forget to mention, Trackland was a development team of one person, myself. And so even if I did train myself to be able to do all of these things, just the overhead of managing all this stuff is just wild. So yeah, we'll move on from there. I do just kind of like a quote here that I found that I thought was appropriate here. Don't be afraid of complexity, but don't reinvent the wheel either. I do want to, okay. So we're gonna come back to the whole Trackland thing. Well, let's see. Okay, so yeah, so I wanna talk about what our solution accomplished for us, right? So I will say that we use Bubble and then we also use Mux. I will kind of say that Mux this presentation isn't about Mux and it isn't even about Bubble either. This was just the stack that we chose to accomplish what we needed to do. But you could accomplish this using Brightcove, Cloudflare Video, or a number of other services as well. But for us, we were able to kind of rely on Mux to be able to handle all of our ingest, whether that's going to be a VOD upload or an actual live streaming source. It's going to handle all of our automatic renditions. It's going to handle our assigned URLs, our automatic subtitling, which is pretty cool. Didn't talk about that yet. And also automatic cold storage. So Mux will automatically identify what videos haven't been seen within a certain time frame and migrate that over to some sort of cold storage that isn't costing you as much. The other cool thing that if you were looking really closely at the little video demo earlier, that Mux's player does automatically handle thumbnail generation as well as seeking. So when you're scrolling over that playback bar, it will show little thumbnails to show you where you're at in the video, right? Which is pretty cool. So I'm just gonna kind of go through a few slides here really quick that go over how easy it is to implement. Not just, some of these features are Mux specific, but in some of the more general ones like the player really aren't. In this example here, so this is going to be the upload feature, right? Not sure if any of you know, without using an API like Mux, not sure if you would even know how you would upload video content to a server like that, right? This here is just a JavaScript element that Mux has that I can drop into an HTML element, and then just being able to hand it and upload URL, all of the drag and drop functionality, or being able to choose a file is pretty much handled for me. So that's going to deliver it to Mux, even with larger files. It'll do continuation, all that sort of thing. You don't have to worry about that on your own. This is also very CSS-able, so you can style that however you need to. The next piece, so that's going to be one ingest method, right? So that's going to be like, I have a file that I want to upload to Mux's servers to then be able to deliver, right? In our case, in most cases, we were live streaming these. And so for that, we would use a combination of their dashboard or just their API. I really love Mux's documentation. I often refer to it as the Stripe of streaming video for the reason of their documentation is really great. I mean, even if you can't, I mean, you can probably read this from that distance, but it's pretty simple to be able to use their API. I've used almost all of their calls just from the Bubble API connector, so it's all very simple. Being able to create a live stream, what's going to happen is I'll go into their dashboard. Here it is, just kind of like list all of my assets. Once I have an asset there that's created, I'm going to pull on that bottom there in pink highlighted, the playback ID. That's just kind of like the golden number that I need in order to play that back wherever I want. But also on this page, you can also see that I can customize their default player. There's further customizations that you can actually do, super CSS-able, et cetera, as well. So there are, the player customizations. There's also a bunch of events and properties that you can pull using like Bubble to JS, JS to Bubble, to be able to know like what's the current state of it. Is it paused? Is it playing? Is it fast forwarding? What's the current time code at? Which you can then use to use however you want in your Bubble app, right? Here you can see I just handed it the Mux playback ID. That's the simplest way of implementing it. Super easy to do. Some cool use cases that I thought of here. Well, some standard ones, some cool ones. You can use it honestly to basically build like all of the feature set that is available to you between Bubble and Mux and other APIs like it. You could build basically a YouTube platform, right? Obviously, you'd have to solve the business use case there, but all of the features are available to you to be able to upload, deliver content. On the bottom left here, you can actually, using Bubble, we're actually developing this feature right now with Trackland. I'll kind of use that as an example, I guess, to illustrate. But we are building a feature for press to be able to access a live stream as it's going, being able to choose what parts of the stream that they want to be able to clip and then download, and be able to download that for highlights, for their Instagram posts, things of that nature, because we're trying to encourage, press to be able to report on our events. And so I'm in the process of building that right now in Bubble, where they can trim and do all of those features, literally just between Bubble and Mux. No real additional plugins even needed for that, just their API. You can also do, what is it called, like party watching. So like you can do this with like Disney Plus, where you have a friend who's watching the same content and you're watching the content at the same time as another person. You can have a chat going obviously too, but the APIs allow you to be able to sync content playback as well. And then, okay, cool. And then down here we have, this was just supposed to represent like private communities like Circle or Twitch for content as well. So that's pretty much it. Here's a little bit, that's where you can find me. That's my personal website, and then that's Trackland's website if you'd like to. We are doing an event next month, so if you'd like to check that out, if you are into professional track and field, then check it out. Thank you very much.